Hello, everybody. My name is Greg S. Miller. I am a sophomore acting major here at WMU from Detroit, Michigan. And today I'm here with Eddie Codrington, who is a recent alum of our Jazz Studies program. Eddie, would you care to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey, what's up, guys? My name is Eddie Codrington. I graduated in 2018 from Western with my bachelor's, and then in 2020, this past April, with my master's. And I'm a saxophone player, composer, and producer. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
All right, I'm glad to hear. So, my first question I have for you, Eddie, is you have an upcoming project in October that I've heard about. Do you care to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm releasing an EP Thursday, October 1st on Bandcamp entitled Die. This is my first EP as a producer. Um, and I started the EP back when everything happened with coronavirus. Um, I started it just by making one-off tunes, just recording in my room, and posting them to the internet. And then I found after a while that I had like four or five of them, and they sounded pretty okay. So I figured, oh, why not release an EP, and try to see what I can do with that. So the EP kind of is it's a little discombobulated because the tone from each tune is vastly different because whatever I was feeling that month or that week, that's what I recorded. So some of them are pretty upbeat, some of them are pretty melancholy. So it's got a wide variety of sounds on it.
And what exactly was your inspiration for this project?
Yeah, so there's been a lot going on during quarantine. I mean, there's the quarantine itself. There's the massive resurgence of the BLM movement. So a lot of mixed feelings, have been coursing through my brain and everyone else's brain, and especially for Black people. There's been a lot of fear and a lot of confusion, and each week is I think is a kind of a battle to try to make some sort of sense of all this because we as Black people, we're handling the quarantine as well as recent police brutality shootings and stuff like that. Um, so the record kind of shines a light. It's not really a narrative of that. It more shines a light into what's happening in my head. So that's why some weeks, or that's why some tunes are fairly upbeat, because that's kind of me trying to force myself to be force myself not to go crazy. And then the title track "Die" that has to do with more of what's going on in terms of the Black Lives Matter, and that's more befitting of the tone, the overall dark tone of the EP and what's going on around us. So that was kind of my inspiration for the EP and everything that's going on.
And do you feel that COVID had affected your production in any kind of way?
Yeah, I think COVID greatly affected my production. Um, it was, I wouldn't say positive, but it boosted production. Um, Meaning that, since I had nothing to do, I kind of had to keep myself occupied. So I kind of threw myself into the world of production. I dabbled a little bit with, you know, um, some tunes I had produced, but I found myself with a ton of time, and I was just in my room. So I decided, well, why not, fully get invested into audio production and see what I can do. And I was spending hours just learning really awesome techniques and figuring out what sounds I want to use and working on sound design and I'm also a composer, so I was writing in a different way and doing all sorts of things that, I mean, honestly, it's been a lot of fun for me because I feel like I'm finally realizing my music. There's a lot of power in being able to um, write, record, uh, produce, and release your own music, and have you just be the core of all that. Um, Being able to be like self-sufficient and release your own music whenever you want on whatever timeline you want. So that's been a highlight of it.
That's dope. That sounds great. So as a recent grad of our jazz studies program, how has entering the real world been different from what you were expecting?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of us weren't expecting to graduate into, a recession, graduate into a quarantine. Um, and I think that, I don't know, some people I think are able to handle it differently than others. For me, I just come from a place, of always having to always having to figure it out, always having to adapt to what's going on. And so, I expected to graduate and, go and start my career. But now the music industry, I mean, right now it doesn't really exist. It looks vastly different. So I kind of had to decide, well, what am I going to do? I can't not make music. And so that's what kind of threw me into the production world. I was like, okay, well, here's a way that I can get my music out there and, make a little bit of money and just still fulfill that need to make music. And I think that really comes from my background growing up. My parents were very adamant about, teaching me to figure things out, and to just make sure that things get done. And I don't know, for me, I kind of just adjusted as soon as it happened. I was kind of just like, well, this is the reality. It's not changing. So I could either, sit here and feel bad about it or do something. So that's kind of how I feel.
So would you say that COVID kind of affected or changed your career goals in a sense?
I think more it affected the timeline, and a little bit. So my plan was to, after I graduated, was to stay here in Kalamazoo, raise some money, and head out to LA to start my career. Um, and so the only thing COVID really did was make sure that I have to stay here, and which I was already planning. Um, and at first I felt I was like, oh man, like I'm not going to be able to play live, and I'm not going to be able to do this or do that. But I realized that well, if I moved to LA right now, I wouldn't be able to actually start a career. I would just be paying LA rent and just being in my house. And so I figured, well, I'm paying Kalamazoo rent. Why don't I just stay here and do what I would be doing in LA anyway? So all it really did was, just affect my mindset. So
All right. Would you say that it feels interesting being a creator at this time, or how does it feel for you?
yeah, I feel like being a creator at this time, I don't know. I feel like things are getting like flipped on their heads. There's as creators, I think that we always get the talk about like, oh, when are you gonna start your real job, or when are you gonna get something more stable. But right now, nothing is really stable, and so I feel like as a creator, I don't know. I feel like there's more of a chance to to be heard, or to have some sort of recognition, because right now, there's no one is really doing anything. And so as creators, I feel like we're already kind of used to that, uncertainty of, I don't really know if, I'm going to make it this month. I don't really know if that's going to happen. And so the change from, pre-quarantine to post-quarantine, now in the middle of quarantine, in my head, there wasn't really much that changed. So I was just like, okay, well, you know, I think now is time to just keep creating, I guess. So.
And speaking of creating, in addition to your own music, do you have any other projects that you're working on?
Yeah, actually, well, a couple projects that just ended. I was able to work with a an artist slash poet named David White, or also known as Mr. Star City, and he's a brilliant painter. He just had this exhibit in Los Angeles called Loverboy, and he commissioned me to write the music for this exhibit. And he's just like he's like one of those visionary guys. He's very incredible artist. He just worked with Zendaya, and he's got like another exhibit going on. So that was really cool. I'm also currently working on a project for um, Nancy Zeltzman. She's the head of marimba at Berkeley, and she's also a faculty member at Boston Conservatory. And so they're two amazing musicians, and they commissioned me for a piece for a really interesting instrument that is basically like a MIDI controller, but in the form of a marimba. So I'm working on that as well as there's an organization called National Sawdust, and they have this commission contest, and I was one of the winners of the commission contest. So I'm working on that as well. So kind of got my hand in a lot of different things, from composition to production to just playing saxophone.
Well, congratulations to you for all of your
Thank you.
accomplishments, of course. So taking it back a little bit, gonna dive into your childhood just a tad. How did you know that you wanted to be a jazz musician?
Yeah, for me, it was interesting. I kind of always was, as long as I can remember, I kind of knew. I have three older sisters, and one of them used to babysit me quite a bit, and she was really into lots of different kinds of music. You know, we were in the 2000s. We were listening to, Avril Lavigne and Usher and Alicia Keys and Backstreet Boys, and like there's a lot of more popular music. And I can remember, as a young kid, like 4 or 5 years old, I didn't really resonate with that music, which is kind of strange. I don't know, if a 4-year-old should be having such strong opinions about music. But I thought that I didn't like music because that's all I'd heard. So I was just like, yeah, I don't like music. But of course, that makes no sense. And then I heard what I think now was Sonny Rollins playing the saxophone, and from then on, I knew that like whatever that was, I need to be a part of that. I need to throw myself into that. And so from then on, I knew that I wanted to be a saxophone player. I wanted to play jazz, and I've just been doing it ever since.
Do you have any, influences or influencers?
Yeah. I think some of my earliest influences were Paul Desmond and Jerry Mulligan, two saxophone players who they had a very West Coast style, and that really influenced how I wanted to sound on the saxophone. Um, and then later, of course, John Coltrane and Sonny Rollins and Michael Brecker. I was very interested in these incredible saxophone players. Recently, in college, I listened to a lot of Mark Turner, who's an incredible saxophone player, as well as Kenny Wheeler, who's a huge influence for me. Kenny Wheeler was a trumpet player and composer. He's born in Canada, but he lived in London for most of his career. And he's just an incredible composer and trumpet player slash flugelhorn player, and he's had just such a profound effect on my composing and even my producing now. Like I feel like those people are kind of bleeding into every aspect of music that I try to make. So yeah, those are some of my my top influences.
Cool, cool. What made you decide that you wanted to go to college?
I think I think I was always trying to go to college. Both my parents um, have college degrees, and so they kind of expected us to do that. Um, I in high school, well, in elementary school through high school, I was also a track athlete, and so I thought I was going to do track and field and music and school. But I was always kind of leaning more towards music, even though I was very heavily involved in sports. Um, so when I got to Western, I found that they didn't have a men's track team. I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of a sign. I think it's time to, you know, just do music. So I kind of always have been planning on going to college. I didn't plan on doing a master's degree, but things kind of just lined up perfectly right at the end of my bachelor's. My teacher Andrew Rathbun was uh, was looking for a graduate assistant, and it kind of lined up that the two graduate assistants he had before me graduated right as I um, graduated from undergrad. So I just stayed and did my master's and was his GA for 2 years. So
Sounds good. Looking back at your time at Western, do you think that the Jazz Studies program prepared you for your career?
yeah, I think I was able to get a lot out of my time at Western. Um, the jazz faculty um, is very each member of the faculty is very um, self-realized. They're all musicians that have their own voice, and fortunately their purpose is to give each student their own voice. So um, after classes and stuff, I was, hitting up my teachers and trying to, ask, well, hey, what's like the, what's the best way to get this, or what's the way I can, have this sound or whatever. So they were very communicative and very willing to help with anything I needed, as well as very forthcoming with opportunities. Each month, some professor would email us with some contest that was happening and some opportunity or some grant or something for us to try to get. And fortunately, I was able to get some of those. So I would say that they helped a great deal with my development as a musician, and um, I think I feel very prepared with the tools that they gave to be able to, traverse the music world and have a successful music career.
I love that. Um, do you have a most significant and or most memorable moment or memory while you were here at Western?
Let's see. Had so many, but I think there is a there's a saxophone player named George Garzone who came to Western, and he's actually the teacher of my teacher. And so we had him as a guest artist, and he came, and he's from an era of saxophone that is, just um, so real and honest, and his playing is so incredible. And he came, and we were able to spend time with him and ask him questions and hang out with him. And then later, I was invited to my teacher's house where George was, and so I got to sit next to him and ask him questions about all the saxophone players that I listened to and all the legends, and it was just a really special interaction that I won't forget.
It's amazing. Um, well, finishing off, do you have any advice you could give to current students in middle school, or not middle school, music school, excuse me, or any final thoughts?
Yeah. I would say, this new kind of era is tough. I was fortunate enough to be done with school, before COVID hit, but I would say that even though things are crazy and unknown, try to remember what first attracted you to music and try to get back to that as much as you can. Try to do things that help you remember that love for music as much as possible, because that's what's going to help you get through this time and um, and and to make sure that you still have a clear goal in mind, a clear goal of who you want to be as a musician and what you want to accomplish, and make sure you're doing at least one thing each day to try to accomplish that goal. So that's what I would say.
And that is great advice. Well, that concludes everything that I have for you. It was wonderful having you. Do you have anything else you would like to close off with?
Yeah, just make sure you check out my EP Die that is releasing on Bandcamp October 1st. That's next Thursday. Um, I've got some great features on it, and yeah, I hope you all like it.
All right. And you said that will be available on Bandcamp, right?
Yep, I'll provide a link everywhere. So yeah,
Great. I'll make sure to get that out. It was lovely having you,
awesome. Thanks so much.
of course.